In the Arctic, circling back, I will develop a new body of work inspired by field studies that I made in Svalbard, Norway. I was fortunate to join 26 other artists on a 2-week journey aboard the Antigua, a tall-masted ship in sailing around the west coast of Svalbard, which is an archipelago of islands midway between mainland Norway and the North Pole. We were primarily between 78 and 80 degrees north latitude, and this is one of the most northern settlements in the world, and it is the location where the North Pole explorers set off to explore and to discover the North Pole for their countries or for their scientific explorations. Each day we made a different anchorage in the waters between kind of the midway point of Svalbard and the northern edges of the archipelago. And we would anchor, we would set out in Zodiacs, which are a motorized vehicle, motorized small craft with inflated perimeter side areas. I guess they're similar to what's used in rafting or whatnot, but ours were very rigid for the most part. We're in BFDs, life jackets, personal flotation devices, certainly dressed warmly, and we explored and experienced sometimes landings, sometimes the ice in the water from the Zodiac themselves, or just stayed on the ship and then experienced it from a distance sometimes. I took photographs, made oil paintings, and made quick sketches as well. This activity, this series of Zoom calls, is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Fortunate to be able to be awarded a number of grants over the last 6-7 years, and that has made many of my art exploration possible. So I will be switching between cameras here and there so that you can see what I'm demonstrating. So we're going to do that first of all now. All right, so I will be working on watercolor paper that I've secured to a rigid board. This happens to be the same type of board that I paint on. It's a canvas that's mounted to a fairly stable board, and I'm often oil painting on the front of them. But when I'm doing watercolor, I will tape watercolor paper to the back of it. So that is what I'm doing here. I will be using photographs from the Arctic that I had taken, and I'll share a photograph I will be working on. I'll have them up on the screen, but it's easier for me to share on the phone. Your screen. Hopefully folks are seeing that as well. And what I'm sharing now is just a black and white image. I do have some reference photographs in color, but sometimes it's easier to see the individual shapes and whatnot from the black and white, if that makes any sense. And I'm using, for my adhesive, glue,
white Elmer's glue, but then I'm also mixing with it isopropyl alcohol. And the reason that I'm doing that is so that it speeds up the drying process, and paper is less likely to curl then. And it doesn't have to be a lot of the alcohol. And it's not that smelly really, since it's mixed with the glue. I guess maybe the glue masks it somewhat. And how much, up to the user in terms of knowing how much you might use, hard to say. But looking at the image, and just I'm working on watercolor paper here. I will tape it down once I get some of the bordering areas covered, just because I'm going to be going right to the edge of the paper. I will be potentially cropping it depending on how well it works, especially since I'm doing a demonstration. One never knows exactly how it's all going to work. So my main goal here at the beginning is going to be to cover as much of the paper as quickly as possible, very similar to what I would be doing for painting, just to be able to we call it killing the white paper, so that one can get the feeling of light set up fairly quickly. And I'm not being that careful with where the glue is going, because I know I'm going to be applying to the paper. I guess the main thing I'm trying to do is not get it on the front of the construction paper. This is just standard construction paper, nothing too fancy. I did order from a few different sources just to be able to get a variety of colors, because some offered more colors than others. And my main point with these explorations in this project that's funded is to learn a little bit more about, or to communicate some of the feeling or the observations that I had from my trip. I did paint and sketch a lot during my trip. But sometimes it's nice to be able to go back and reflect on how everything went. It was 2022 that I had journeyed with 26 other artists, 11 crew members on a tall ship. They mentioned it was a once in a lifetime experience in terms of being able to do this. I was able to go back and get together with some of the artists again in October of 2024 for an exhibit in New York City, and that was wonderful to be able to reconnect. But for the applicants that might be considering applying to the Arctic Circle, definitely do it. It's competitive. They take about 10% of the applicants. But the person would learn a lot. Sometimes I can take the paper and then drag it through the glue. So that's what I'm going to do here now. Just sometimes it's whatever is faster. Be able to get this, especially since you all are waiting, watching what I'm doing, and trying to make it more interesting for folks. I don't wear gloves. I do have paper towels handy. This isn't toxic material, so I'm not worried about that. Messy, yeah, it's a little messy. But of a mess here than the scratch board, certainly, that I had done recently. Guess my main goal is to try to get some of the glue off the top of the paper. Elmer's dries clear, but it still is going to look a little funky. Is this going to be finished work? Who knows? It's more for me to be able to think about the experience and really remember it. So some of these will be more having to do with exploring, like I said, the experiences. So we'll concentrate on doing that and less about finished work. So I'm just trying to see if there's ways to we'll just continue. I mean, close up images. So I'm using scissors, sometimes tearing as well. And there'll be a fair amount of overlapping. I will use some of these scraps layering on top of the colors that are on there. One of the aspects of collage is that one isn't doing a lot of detail. Yes, some of this may look like detail because of the shapes and whatnot that I'm tearing, cutting, whatnot. But compared to my palette knife work or my brush work, when it comes to my paintings, it's a far cry from that in terms of the detail. So concentration is massing, connecting shapes, certainly, as you can see what's here already. So, so that maybe helps. And I'm just thinking aloud here a little bit in terms of what I might want to sneak some. Yeah, this isn't completely dry. I just want to maybe sneak some of this darker blue behind the lighter blue. And just like in painting, there's a fair amount of thinking about the order of things in terms of the last images are the ones that are most forward. And the other images are behind that. So yeah, it's a little bit. Thought this through a little bit better, but and there are collage artists that use torn images from magazines and whatnot. This isn't quite like that. Some of the techniques might be similar, but it's more about the colors. This is not as precise as some of the artists that, like I said, do very detailed oriented artwork. This isn't that. So like I said, I just wanted to sneak this behind. Just like in painting, sometimes there's a push-pull going on. Sometimes there's this as well, in terms of, but in this case, it's more overlapping items. I'm going to use the back of this wrapped panel because it's shiny. The glue's going to, I can clean it up a little bit better, but to try to keep a little bit more order and not get glue just everywhere. I'm probably working a bit faster than I normally would, just because I want to be able to have folks see more of a finished product, semi-finished product. I'll show you another piece that I had done and gives you more of an idea. So hopefully you're seeing a little bit, obviously it's progressing in terms of these are some of the rocks in that lower area and the water overlapping. And then I'm working back behind here. I'm probably going to consider what color to use for that sky. And I'm considering this probably just for that, not the brighter, but not the darker elements either. So this is what I'm going to use. So it has a little bit of a greenish tint to it, but I feel like there's enough gray there that that it works. And then when I put some warmth in some of the sky patches that are pushing out, that's going to make some sense. So, and we're gonna have to turn it this way because we want to cover more of the paper. And the person could just cover, people ask when I paint, well, do you cover, paint the whole sky first and then go back and paint the trees in front of it? When I'm painting outdoors, no, because the whole thing is wet and it's not going to, I would not be able to get the paint to release from the onto the wet paint. So I'm just doing a little sketching of mountains here. Tell myself cut this. I don't want to, obviously the mountains would be, that's a negative space to the sky. I could have covered the entire. So a partial approximation of what's going on there in the sky. And I may end up adding some more glue, although I probably have enough glue here. And I'm using construction paper, watercolor paper for what I'm gluing this onto. I feel like it probably helps a little bit that it's absorption. And I've not found that it curls very much, although as you'll see in a moment, I'm going to start taping the edges where the construction paper has been put on, and little by little more of the paper will be glued down. Like I said, I wanted to be able to work to the edges, so I did not want to tape everything down prematurely. And what I'm doing off camera is just spatulating, that's not really a word, but collecting the glue, transferring it onto the back of this sky part. And then to be able to transfer that onto my watercolor paper, and it's going over a little bit, and that's just fine. I can glue or trim some of that afterwards. So like I said, I'm going to do a little bit of taping down this paper to restrict any curling that might be going on, or at least keep the paper flat. I have enough here that just pressing down, making sure that the glue, it does set up faster with the isopropyl alcohol that is there, which is very useful. So that's something that I've learned online from another artist in terms of how this mixture of glue and alcohol works. So we got that going on now. And we're going to add a little bit of some of the rock area here. Develop this on top of here. So some darks, or maybe before I do that, I'm going to cut in a little bit more of the water here. So a bit darker than this, not as dark as this, just reflecting the mountain that is here. So what to use for that? In the mountain construction paper, maybe I have a darker brownish. I know I have brown, purple. I don't really want to go quite to the black. It's not really green. That is the same brown as that. One doesn't have infinite amount of colors when it comes to the construction paper. And you know, there's not so much rules. I'm need to break the rules, so I'm realizing some of this brown tape that I have is actually enough of a contrast to that I believe it may work here for some of the water. And I know it's going to tape right onto there just perfectly fine. So we're going to try that. Very easy to tear, and it's self-adhesive, so that works. Assuming that the Elmer's glue is going to stick onto this, it will all work fine. Might try to sneak a little bit of underneath here. See how that works. The Elmer's lets it slide underneath there, okay, which is not bad. I don't mind having some of the white showing through. It is watercolor paper. I might just do a little bit of a wash on some of the colors that are showing, the white that is showing through. Hard to say. my main point here is to create the illusion of the rippling through the water. So it's not rectangular so much. It's more more ripply. So some of these are going to be layered on top of the brown. Some of them are going to be layered on top of the blue. And yes, ripples do get smaller as they retreat. So I have to make these smaller as they go back. So to make it plausible. That is what's happening here. I think a little bit about what the layout is going to be. Maybe that. And a few more pieces here that maybe are going to do some of this foreground. Nice to save some of the scraps that one has. I did post to my website a scratchboard demonstration. So if you go to greglecker.com, it's https www.greglecker.com, and then search for the Arctic or the Arctic circling back, you should be able to find that there's a number of pages under that have to do with paintings from the Arctic. There's some video that I recently posted that is a painting that I had done on location up there. So you should be able to find that as well. It's been edited. It's about an hour long. You can speed it up to 2 times. It doesn't quite work like YouTube, but so hopefully you're seeing how these ripples are coming about. And towards starting to maybe work with some of the black. I have 2 different blacks. I have a darker and a lighter black. Does that make any sense? This is the darker, this is the lighter. I'm going to use the lighter for the mountains in the back and the darker for these shadow area and maybe for this edge here. So just to give it a little bit of contrast. So I'm going to probably go and do the back mountain. I'm trying to work around the composition a little bit here and there just because with the paper being wet and gluey, trying to keep my hands a little bit out of that mix so it's not completely just a mess. And I suppose a person could, if you printed multiple versions of this, a person could cut it directly out of it. That would save time. I'm partially eyeballing it and partially going to draw a little bit onto it. So I just happen to have a little chalk here. that I'm going to use, which is going to help me just a little bit. And so that is going to be the shape that is going to be cut out and layered onto this area. So it will allow me to have some scraps that then I can use elsewhere, which is useful. For me to have this on the camera. Because I'm say back cutting, don't know if it really makes the word, but I'm going to have the negative of those shapes that then I can use elsewhere on the piece, on this construction paper, just to save time and energy in terms of cutting everything, as long as I don't put it right next to it, or maybe I flip it over, then it's going to be less obvious that it's not just the scrap. Hopefully that makes some sense. So there we have the lighter aspects of the mountain there. And I might try to, we'll see how this works. Not positive, but I just wanted, I'd love to have a little bit of those sloping areas show up. White behind. Okay, that looks like it's at least sloping the correct direction, which is good, more or less. One has to think about where the fold is going to be. It has to be such that the angles of the cuts, when it mirrors, it's going to make sense. I don't know that I want to make it all the same angle, because how boring would that be? And I'm still trying to keep the paper joined. Joined as a mass, that is. So we've got create some interest that it's not just the same thing. We can bring it up there. Don't worry, I will add in some of the lighter areas, and that's in that guy. I might just try to do some little, these are going to be maybe a little fussy, these little bird beak things, I'll call it, just a tiny bit of snow. I feel like it's going to be a lot easier for me to cut those as a negative space here than to try to glue on these tiny little remains. But I might use some of them for areas here and there. We'll see. The main part is like how to get them to stick. I think if there's a remainder of some glue here and there, then it probably can work, and it will just stick on its own. The notion of me trying to get any pieces to stick or try to get glue stuck to the back of these tiny little pieces, that's going to be next to impossible. And this might be something that this is going to be a finished painting, who knows? Finished art, I should say. Maybe it's more an inspiration for a painting in the future. I've been doing some block printing And one of the things I like about that is that it helps me to simplify, connect shapes. So and get some of the excess glue off the front of the construction paper and more on the back of the construction paper with my painting knives here. A lot of glue there. We'll try to pre-wet a little bit of the paper here. See how close I actually get. I will do some pre-wetting here just because I know I'm going to do some of the dark there, and maybe that is where one of the scraps are going to go. Okay, that's very wet. Should be able to slide fairly easily here and there. And I'm okay if there's a little bit of white showing up on the top of that. In here, that will just be some of the perhaps some of the snow at the edges. So I think that's a small approximation of what is going on in that shape. Now I have this leftover here, which how am I going to use that? I'm leaning towards maybe flipping it over and using it this edge, maybe turning it a little bit, or maybe it's going to be the part that's riding up on that. Maybe that makes more sense. Because then I'm going to layer some of the darker black on top of it, I believe. Let's see how that might work. Maybe there, especially now that that piece is torn, it can rotate a little bit. Maybe it'll already stick there, right there. And we need to lift up this tape since we're working to the edge there. We're going to get this slid there. And that's going to hold it certainly too. Yeah, there's a little bit of correlation to that, but I think most people are not going to see that specifically. I'd like to keep more of a straight line on that edge. I'm thinking that this is going to work okay for that shape. What do I have left? Oh, I have a torn piece of paper there, which I feel like might work with that. But then I want to have a straight. What I'm looking at is this area here. So towards things straight, and then I'm going to do a little bit of that bird beak cutting. Get some white to show through this edge there a little bit, get some variety of my edges. So that going to be a little bit of that. I don't need that extra over there. And like I said, I'm going to cut a little bit of, these are mostly just going to be horizontal. I don't think that they need to go any specific directions. I feel like they're a bit longer than some of the other bird beaks shapes. And the folds are not going to be so much of an issue because it's going to lie flat once the glue dries. It's very much like play, this, compared to, I guess, painting maybe. When I paint, I sometimes paint with my fingers with gloved hands helps to be able to spread the paint around quickly. I especially did that in the Arctic. I did not bring, I had a little bit of bristle brushes for the watercolor, but for the oil painting, I specifically did not bring solvent because I did not want to introduce that into that environment up there. Can't fly with it anyhow. So I used just straight oil paints and yeah, that can come down a little bit more because it's closer. If you look closely, if this is further back, that's a little bit closer. You can see how fairly easy it is to get the glue on these areas without getting it all over one's hands. So those painting knives are really, they're a useful thing. There's not going to be a lot of repositioning on this because once it's down, I'm going to suggest that it probably wants to stay down. Otherwise, there's going to be issues. Paint on the top, on the front of things, which is probably not so good. Just wanting to get a little bit of color down on these things where and then I'm going to think about what to do for this color and then also this color scratch light in the sky and then maybe a slightly darker colors here and there. Not sure about that, but might think a little bit about this. Maybe this is going to be some of this blue, so it's kind of flip-flop. Here it's light against dark, then it's going to be dark against light, if that makes any sense. So that's paper. So or this scrap of paper. So and how that is going to be done, not positive. This area I feel like is easier because it's just straight lines or straight lines. Don't know if that really is an apt description, but see the general line that I want to create. And it's just a question of cutting out um, the other shapes and how to do that. So again, still thinking that I can probably make it work with some of these negative cuts, but keeping in mind that they want to, there's variety. Some are very thin, some are sharper, I mean wider. Maybe some are blunter, like the lengths of them vary. Can't be cut too far apart because the paper still has to hold itself together. I'm sensing maybe, is there a difference in front and back? No, I don't really think so. The paper's just dyed. That out of the wet glue. This is where it starts getting messy, where it starts sticking all over the place. I'm Nice thinner passage. It's easy to get turned around and to forget which direction your layer is going or your piece of paper is going, if that makes any sense. So the idea is that a little bit lighter value than this area, and we might even layer on top of some of the darker here. Not sure what to do with this. Maybe there's some drawing too, not sure. That probably, I think that is making sense now. So we're just gonna dip into the glue here now, so you can see what's going on. And back to see what, I'm not gonna glue the very, where my finger is, because that's, remember, that's off the paper. I need to hold on to something here. Keep myself from getting too covered in glue. Okay, so that's enough. Looking at my reference photograph, which is out of the view for you all, but got some semblance of order going on there. Might go back with another piece here. And there might even be some pieces that come down this way, but we'll probably stay out of that area. Probably go back down to this area just to leave that area dry some. Really good stuff. And at this point, I'm going to take off, glue this area down, this piece of paper, and I'm going to glue this area of the paper down. I feel like there's probably enough. This. All right, so now we're gonna go down and back down into this area on the lower left. We have about 10 minutes left. We have a lot of the paper covered. We're gonna go into this area. I'm just gonna lay this on top of this area here and going to cut again our wire black. That makes any sense. And this time we're gonna use these instead of these being sharp periods that I'm gonna cut out. They're going to be more blunt. But it's similar idea to the notion of the, if you remember me talking about cutting those bird things out, bird beaks. Here I'm ripping variety shape, also sometimes a little bit faster than the cutting. Working up to here, about, don't know how much of these rocks we're going to get. I'm going to tear across there. Trying to approximate the shape that I have going on there. Might use some straight edge at the bottom. And again, another tear of the rougher tops of the rocks. The reason for that is that there's some rationale for having straighter bottoms, because remember, that's the water line. So it would make sense if that's a little bit more straight. Some of it is knowing how the paper is going to tear. There's certain directions that paper will tear and certain directions that it will not tear. And so that is why I was thinking about some of these shapes. There's method in that, which you'll see shortly, I hope. When I want to keep some of that area connected. But not connected to the shore. Does that make any sense? I don't know. Hopefully we'll have some scraps left over here and there that I can use elsewhere in this. I obviously missed that, but some of these things might work for that. I'm just gonna lay them on top of where maybe they get used. There's some scraps here that I can use. Maybe I'll just drop where those rocks ended up being. So maybe there's that. And then maybe there's this odd curlicue type of thing that's going to connect that rock to the shore. I don't know for sure if that's going to stay together, if I'm going to lose that little piece. Probably is going to lose that little piece. Yeah, I'm going to lose that. Put that back. About 5 minutes left. Time really flies when you're having fun. And probably easier to work from the top of this down. If I start cutting from the bottom, then there's going to be less and less. And again, these are, want to keep in mind directions of the rocks, what direction they're lying. If that rock was going down, not going to be an exact copy of that. Again, it's art is poetry. It's not a police report. They're on top of our brown. And we get some more smaller pieces here and there. Maybe there's going to be some larger pieces too. Not so much that it falls apart, obviously. But I want to get a little bit of variety. Still want the brown to show through. I don't mind if some of the white shows through as well. I just don't want to lose all of that lovely brown that was there. That's going to act as a little bit of the sand area that we have going on. Some unexpected shapes here and there, which is fine. Some variety. I don't think it looks too much like ripples, which is an okay thing. I'd even try. 5 minutes left. I will scan this and get it posted. It's both where it is and then where it will be when I get some more work on it done. I'm probably not going to glue this down because I'd like to spend just a little bit more time refining it, but I will let you know, let you in on like showing you what it's going to look like. It's going to be like that, but again, I want to just get a little bit more smaller pieces here and there. But yeah, it's coming. I feel like it's coming together. I feel like this could be a little bit of this area on the mountain in the background. It's a little bit softer. Now that mountain area a bit more dry. I have a chance of getting this tiny little paper to stick. Firstly, I want to cover up those lines that are done on ink. There's no way that's going to erase. But there we go, that little piece there, some distant. So I think you have some idea of what's going on. I don't have the areas here. I'm almost thinking, just having looked at this paper towel, that it is possible that just ripping some tiny little pieces of paper towel here going to work in the sky. It's not releasing from my fingers very well, but I have a feeling that the softness of the ripped areas are maybe going to work with some of the bright areas in the sky. Not sure about that. We're gonna see. I'm liking a little bit of I just feel like it probably needs a little bit more time spent, that it's not all the same. I'll get this down here more so that it shows up. I'm liking somewhat that effect. So again, not a completely finished work, but not bad for an hour worth. Hopefully you can see that. I'll just turn it a little bit. So we've got some semblance of the scene going on here. So more to come in a future session. So again, thank you all for joining. I appreciate time. Time is valuable for everyone. So I'm learning as I'm going along here. So I'll continue with that. So again, thank you very much. We'll be ending the call here in just a minute. So have a wonderful day. Bye-bye. So just a little bit more here. See. Plus.